They say that aging is supposed to come with grace, wisdom, and the warmth of family. I used to believe that. I used to picture my golden years surrounded by grandchildren, laughter, Sunday dinners with my sons and their wives fussing over me, and phone calls just to say, "I love you, Mom." But the truth was much colder. When I turned 65, I baked my own cake. I hung a few tired balloons in the kitchen and set the table for 6. My son Jeremy had promised he'd come by, said they'd stop in after his wife's yoga class. I waited and waited. No one came. Not even a text, not even a call. The candles melted into puddles of wax. That night, I cried into a piece of dry chocolate cake and told myself maybe next year would be different. I should have known better. A few days later, a package showed up at my door. No note, no card. Just my name on the shipping label and inside a box of stale store-brand cookies. The kind you find on clearance after the holidays. My heart sank. This was it? My birthday gift from my only son? Not even a phone call. Not even a signature on the shipping slip. I could have gotten angrier I wanted to. But instead, I did something else. Something I thought was graceful. I smiled, closed the box, and told myself I'd take it as a gesture, however lazy. And the next morning, I walked across the street to visit Claire, Jeremy's mother-in-law. Claire and I weren't exactly friends. More like friendly rivals. She was elegant in that sharp, upper-class kind of way, always wearing pearls even to check the mail, always saying things like, "Oh, bless your heart," in that passive-aggressive tone that made you feel 2 inches tall. But still, I thought, maybe she'd enjoy the cookies. Maybe I'd turn a forgettable birthday into a small act of kindness. She opened the door, looked at the box, then at me, and raised an eyebrow. "Well," she said, "I suppose they meant for me to have these anyway." I didn't understand what she meant. At least, not right away. But that sentence stayed with me. It echoed. I suppose they meant for me to have these anyway. Why would she say that? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, her smirk, the way she didn't even pretend to be surprised. And so, I started digging. Not because I was looking for a fight, but because something in my gut told me that this tiny, pathetic box of cookies was just the beginning of something far worse. And I was right. What I uncovered nearly broke me, but it also woke me up. And what I did next changed everything. The next morning, I called Jeremy. I didn't want to accuse him. I just wanted to hear his voice, maybe feel a little less alone. He picked up after the 3rd ring. "Hey, Mom, sorry I didn't call. Things have been crazy." I smiled, trying to keep my voice light. "I got the cookies." Silence. Then a chuckle. "Oh yeah, Claire said she liked them." My blood froze. "Claire said she liked them? I didn't give them to her," I said slowly. "I mean, I did, but you sent them to me." Jeremy cleared his throat. "Well, yeah, but she mentioned she was craving those, so we thought it'd be nice for her to get them. You know how she is." I didn't respond right away. My heart was pounding. He hadn't even sent them to Minot, really. They were meant for Claire all along. I had just been a convenient delivery service. "Right," I said, my voice tight. "So, you remembered my birthday?" Another pause. "Of course," he said too quickly. "We just didn't have time to do anything big. And Claire said you wouldn't mind." Claire said. Claire decided. Claire spoke for me. That was the moment the pieces began to fall into place. Slowly, painfully. For the past year, little things had shifted subtle at first. My name no longer appeared on shared holiday plans. Claire was always consulted first. When I visited, I was offered the smaller chair, the broken mug, the leftover slice of pie. I was asked to watch the house, or walk the dog, while they went out to dinner without me. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid, that getting older just made you invisible sometimes. But this wasn't invisibility. It was erasure. I hung up the phone and sat in the kitchen for a long time. That night, I pulled out the file folder, where I kept all my important papers, me will, my house deed, insurance records. I had added Jeremy to some of the documents a few years back, after his father died. It felt like the responsible thing to do. But now I started reading the fine print. Really reading. And my stomach twisted. One of the documents, a property transfer authorization, was no longer where I'd left it. I always kept it behind the deed, clipped with a red paperclip. Now it was gone. I searched the entire folder. Nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I drove to the county office and requested a property status report. The clerk printed a few pages and handed them over without a word. My house, the one my husband and I bought 30 years ago, the one we paid off together, room by room, brick by brick, was no longer listed under my name alone. A joint tenancy had been established 3 weeks earlier. My co-owner? Claire Donnelly, Jeremy's mother-in-law. My hands shook as I reread the name. This had to be a mistake. A horrible, bureaucratic error. But when I confronted Jeremy, he didn't even deny it. Claire's better with finances, he said. We thought it'd be easier this way. For tax purposes. You changed the deed to my house without telling me, I said, with her name on it. It's still your house, he replied. You live there, don't you? My voice cracked. That's not the point. And then he said something that shattered me. Mom, we're just trying to help. You've been overwhelmed since Dad died. Claire knows how to manage these things. That's when I realized it wasn't just about cookies or birthdays or forgotten chairs. It was about control. They were slowly, silently phasing me out of my own life. I was no longer the mother, no longer the homeowner. I was being turned into a dependent, a guest, an afterthought, and I refused to let that be my ending. So I made a plan. I started by gathering everything I could. Paperwork, phone records, emails, anything that could prove something wasn't right. I called an old friend of mine, Nora, who'd worked in a law office for decades before retiring. She met me for coffee the next morning. I laid it all out. She listened quietly, then leaned in and said, "You need a lawyer, and you need to act fast." That same day, I scheduled a consultation with a local attorney named Rachel Shaw. Young, sharp eyes like steel. I told her everything, laid out every document. She didn't flinch. They forged your signature, she said flatly. Or they coerced you into signing something under false pretenses. Either way, it's elder financial abuse. And it's prosecutable. I felt a wave of nausea. I just want my house back, I whispered. Rachel nodded. And we'll get it. But we're going to do this right. Over the next few weeks, we gathered evidence. Rachel pulled deed filings, reviewed handwriting samples, requested security footage from the notary office where the deed change was supposedly finalized. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances. I smiled on our Sunday calls, answered texts with little thumbs-up emojis, and even sent Claire a thank you note for the cookies. I played the fool, something women my age are expected to do anyway. But inside, I was steel. Then came the invitation. A family reconciliation dinner, Claire called it. She said she wanted us to start fresh, heal old wounds. It would be hosted at her place, easier for everyone. I accepted, of course. I wore my nicest blouse, baked a peach cobbler from scratch, and showed up with a smile. Her house was immaculate, all grays and creams, scented candles burning in every room. Claire hugged me like we were best friends. Jeremy looked uncomfortable. David, me grandson, wasn't there. He's at a sleepover, Claire said sweetly. This way we can talk like adults. I didn't like the sound of that. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Claire poured wine. Then she pulled out a folder and set it on the table between us. We thought it would be a good time to get some things in writing, she said. Jeremy looked down. I opened the folder. Inside were documents, power of attorney forms, healthcare proxies, banking access sheets. Just sign where I've highlighted, Claire said, handing me a pen. I looked at her for a long time. Then I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. Rachel's voice filled the room through speakerphone. "Hi, Claire. This is Rachel Shaw. I'm Mary's attorney. I'd advise you to stop talking and consult legal counsel before proceeding." Claire's face drained of color. Jeremy stood up abruptly. "Mom, what is this?" "It's me," I said calmly, "taking my life back." The next few weeks were a blur of depositions, court filings, and stunned silence from my son's household. The forgery was confirmed through handwriting analysis. The notary who signed off on the deed remembered a different woman entirely. Claire had posed as me, using an old ID she'd somehow gotten from Jeremy's desk drawer. It wasn't just morally wrong, it was criminal. And the court agreed. The deed was voided. Charges were filed. Claire was arrested. Jeremy pleaded ignorance. And maybe he truly didn't know. Maybe he just didn't want to. I moved back into my house fully, with every right restored. But the silence between me and my son that remained. For weeks, we didn't speak. Until one Sunday morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Jeremy standing there, holding David's hand and looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. "Can we come in?" he asked. I didn't answer. I stepped aside. We sat in the kitchen. David munched on toast, unaware of the tension. Jeremy cleared his throat. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to you, I never thought she'd go that far." I sipped my coffee. "You let her treat me like I didn't exist." His face crumpled. "I thought I was keeping the peace. I thought you were strong enough to take it." I set my cup down. "That's the problem, Jeremy. You expected me to be silent, to disappear, because I always have." He looked up. "I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix everything," I said. "But it's a start." That day, we didn't fix everything. But we started something new. A conversation. An acknowledgement. A small crack of light after a very long storm. And sometimes, that's all you need to begin again. The aftermath wasn't clean. Cases like this rarely are. While the legal outcome gave me back my house and my autonomy, it didn't restore the trust that had been broken. Claire's trial moved slowly. She pled not guilty at first, tried to claim that I'd given her verbal permission and that the signature was mine. But the evidence handwriting experts, the notary's testimony, the paper trail told a different story. Eventually, her lawyer pushed for a plea deal, lesser charges, community service, probation. I didn't attend her sentencing. I didn't need to see her again. My fight had never been about vengeance, it had been about dignity. Still, the local paper picked up the story. "Elderly woman fights back after property scam," the headline read. A neighbor recognized me and brought over a lemon cake with a handwritten note. "You're stronger than they thought. We're proud of you." And yet, not everyone was so supportive. At church, a few people asked quiet questions. "Is it true what they say? You really pressed charges on your own daughter-in-law?" "But she has a child." As if being a mother excused everything. As if I was supposed to just swallow the betrayal and pretend it hadn't happened. I smiled politely and walked away. Let them talk. I was done explaining myself to people who would never understand. Jeremy came by more often after that. Not every week, but regularly enough to notice. He brought David, who had grown 2 inches in what felt like a blink. One day, as we picked tomatoes in the garden, he asked, "Grandma, are you still mad at Daddy?" I stopped, heart in my throat. "No, sweetie, I'm just still healing." He nodded, like he understood something far too big for a child his age. That night, Jeremy lingered after David had fallen asleep on the couch. "He misses you," he said. I looked at him. "He's here, that's what matters." He hesitated, then added, "Claire's moved in with her sister. We're separating." I didn't respond. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't relief. Just a quiet exhale, like a door had finally shut. Months passed. I started volunteering at the library. I signed up for a watercolor class. I even started going to a grief support group for widows, something I'd avoided for years. At first, I sat in the back, just listening. But over time, I began to speak. about losing my husband, about moving in with my son, about how everything fell apart and how I slowly, painfully, stitched myself back together. One evening, after group, a woman named Edith approached me. "Your story," she said, "it gave me the courage to confront my own daughter. She's been taking my pension for years. I thought maybe that was just how it had to be. But it's not." I hugged her tightly. "Number, it's not." That's when I understood. My pain wasn't just mine to bear. It was a thread in a tapestry of silent suffering carried by women everywhere. Mothers, grandmothers, caregivers, who were told they're selfish for needing boundaries, who were punished for daring to say, "Enough." I started writing everything down, not just for me, but for others. For the women who would stumble upon my words one night at 2 a.m., desperate for a sign that they weren't alone. That's how healing works. It's never linear, never easy. But sometimes, it begins with telling the truth and not apologizing for it. I began to find joy again, in small, steady doses. A cup of tea in the afternoon sun, a dog-eared novel that made me cry, a voicemail from David, breathless with excitement about his school play. Life didn't go back to how it was before. It never could. But it moved forward. And I chose to move with it. The spring that followed was the first in years I truly noticed. Not just the flowers or the longer days, but the feeling in my chest. Something light, untangled. I had started waking up without the tightness in my throat, without dreading what the mail might bring. I planted lilies that season. My husband had always loved them. The house felt like mine again, not just legally, but spiritually. I moved furniture, replaced curtains, hung family photos that had been boxed away. I let in light, both literally and metaphorically. Jeremy stopped by one Sunday with David and brought along a photo album. "Found this in storage," he said, placing it gently in my lap. As I opened it, my breath caught. Pictures from when David was born, Christmases, beach days, even a candid of me asleep on the couch with a baby in my arm, peaceful, unaware. "I thought you should have it," he said, eyes glassy. "We didn't talk about Claire that day. We didn't need to. Our relationship was still tender, like new skin over a scar. But we were trying." That mattered more than anything. One afternoon, I got a call from a local nonprofit that helps seniors understand legal documents. They'd heard about my case through a volunteer at the book club. "Would you be willing to speak at one of our events?" they asked. My first instinct was to say no. I wasn't a public speaker. I was just a woman who'd been backed into a corner. But something in me said, yes. That night, I wrote for hours. Not a speech, but a story. My story. I wanted them to hear not just the facts, but the feelings. The slow erosion of trust. The quiet despair of feeling invisible. The strength it took to push back when everything told me to stay silent. The day of the event, I stood at a podium in a small community center, facing a crowd of mostly gray hair and kind eyes. I began to speak, voice trembling at first, then growing stronger. I saw heads nodding, tears forming, people gripping the arms of their chairs. When I finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat, and then they clapped. Not polite applause, but something deeper. Resonant. Afterward, a man approached me with his daughter. "My dad," she said, "hasn't spoken about what happened with his brother in 10 years. Your story? It opened something." Her father nodded, eyes wet. "Thank you," he whispered. I went home that night and cried, not from sadness, from release, from knowing that my pain had turned into purpose, that the worst season of my life had become someone else's light. Over time, I started getting letters. Handwritten, typed, even emails. Strangers pouring out their own betrayals, their fears, their gratitude. "You made me feel seen," many of them wrote. I kept every one, a box under my bed, labeled simply, "Truth." And then, one rainy afternoon, A letter arrived with no return address. My heart skipped as I read the familiar handwriting Claire's, just a few shaky lines of ink, no legal threats, no excuses. Just, I lost everything. And maybe I deserved to. I thought I was protecting my life, my home, my family. But I see now I was only protecting the lie. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I read it once, then again, then folded it and placed it in a box labeled past. That's where it belongs. The next few days were strangely quiet. Melissa's sudden silence felt like the calm before a storm, and I didn't trust it. I was cautious, but I tried to carry on with life. I planted some bulbs in the backyard. I started a new novel from the book club. David came over to fix a leaky faucet, and we shared coffee and conversation without the usual tension. I even laughed again. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe things were shifting, not solved, but settling. Then, just as I let my guard down, another envelope arrived. This one wasn't handwritten. It was thick, formal, and stamped by a law firm. My hands shook as I opened it, and what I found made me sit down in disbelief. Melissa was suing me. Suing me for slander, for harassment, and for what she called intentional interference with her family stability. It felt surreal, like a bad television plot. I remember saying out loud, "Is this a joke?" But it wasn't. Inside the envelope was a full civil complaint with dozens of pages. Her accusations were detailed and malicious. She cited the confrontation at dinner, the photos, the forwarded emails, twisted them all to make herself look like the victim. It was a strategic move, not just to hurt me, but to paint herself as a wounded party, in case David ever decided to pursue custody or separation. David was furious. He wanted to drive straight to her apartment and confront her, but I stopped him. "That's what she wants," I said. A reaction she can use in court. Instead, I called Janice, the attorney who had helped me gather documentation weeks earlier. She read through the papers and after a long pause said, "We're not backing down. But we need to play this smart." For the next few weeks, I found myself reliving every uncomfortable moment from the past year over and over. I gathered evidence, filed responses, and gave statements. It was exhausting and dehumanizing, but I refused to be afraid. I was done being silenced. The story gained traction in our community. A journalist who had covered elder abuse cases before reached out. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want my private grief and humiliation aired like dirty laundry. But Janice said something that stuck with me. "Your story isn't just about you. It's about all the women who get dismissed, exploited, and erased." So I agreed. The article ran under the title, "She Lost Her Husband and Then Nearly Lost Her Home." The response was overwhelming. My inbox filled with letters, emails, and comments from people, mostly older women, sharing similar stories. Stories of moving in with their children, only to be treated like burdens. Of financial manipulation, emotional neglect, even legal threats. I realized I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy. I was part of a silent epidemic. That validation lit a fire in me. I became more vocal, not just in my own defense, but for others. I started attending community meetings. I spoke at a senior advocacy group. I met women like Clara, who had been evicted from her daughter's basement after 20 years of service, and Janet, who'd been tricked into signing over her savings by a manipulative son-in-law. Our stories were different, but the pattern was the same. We had loved too much, trusted too deeply, and been punished for it. In court, things moved slowly. Melissa tried every trick in the book: delays, counterclaims, even an emergency order to block my article. But Janice was unshakable, calm, precise, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. "They think we'll back off," she said, "but we won't." One afternoon, as I was reviewing documents, David came by with takeout and a bouquet of tulips. He said, "I know this isn't how any of us imagined life would go, but I'm proud of you." That meant more than he probably realized. I wasn't fighting just for myself anymore. I was fighting for him. For the man I raised to be better than what he married into. And for every woman who had been told to stay quiet, to keep the peace. One evening, just before a major hearing, I received a message from Vanessa. She wanted to testify. She'd been hesitant before, afraid of retaliation. But now, she said, I'm ready. Melissa has hurt too many people. Her testimony was a turning point. Her emails, her memory of events, and her willingness to go public lent our case undeniable credibility. Even Melissa's own lawyer seemed rattled after Vanessa's deposition. I could feel momentum shifting. What began as a lonely fight for dignity had become a movement, small but powerful. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was standing, and I wasn't standing alone. The day of the final hearing arrived with a gray sky and a steady drizzle. It felt poetic, somehow like the world understood the weight of what was about to unfold. I sat in the courtroom with Janice beside me, her presence calm and assured. Across the aisle, Melissa appeared in a tailored blazer, expression carefully composed. But I saw the tension in her jaw, the tight clutch of her hands. She wasn't as confident as she wanted to appear. David was there, seated just behind me. Vanessa, too, looking nervous but resolute. I took a deep breath and reminded myself. I didn't come this far to flinch now. The proceedings began. Melissa's lawyer launched into a melodramatic monologue about emotional distress, defamation, and irreparable damage to family unity. He painted Melissa as a devoted wife, pushed to extremes by a bitter mother-in-law with a vendetta. I listened silently. It was hard. My blood boiled at the lies, the twisted half-truths, but I knew our case was solid. Then, it was Janice's turn, and watching her work was like watching a surgeon. Precise, calm, deadly. She introduced our documentation, emails, texts, photographs. Vanessa's testimony was played on video, her voice clear and unwavering. Then came my turn. I stood and told my story. Not as a victim, but as a woman who had been pushed too far. I spoke of grief, of trust betrayed, of kindness mistaken for weakness. I didn't cry. I didn't falter. I looked the judge in the eye and said, I'm not here to destroy a family. I'm here because I was treated like a disposable maid in a home I was invited into after losing everything. I was exploited, gaslit, and threatened, and I refused to be silenced. There was a hush in the courtroom when I finished. Even Melissa's lawyer looked like he had trouble meeting my gaze. The judge asked a few clarifying questions, then called for a recess. I stepped outside, feeling like I'd just come through a storm. David joined me under the courthouse awning. He didn't say anything for a long time, just stood there beside me watching the rain. Then, quietly, he said, I should have seen it sooner. I let her isolate me from you. I let her control everything. I'm sorry, Mom. I looked at him and saw the boy I'd raised, the one with the big heart who used to pick wildflowers for me after school. You're here now, I said. That's what matters. The judge's ruling came 2 hours later. Every single one of Melissa's claims was dismissed. The court found her suit not only baseless, but malicious in intent. There would be no damages awarded to her, no gag orders, no further action. It was over. She stormed out of the courtroom without looking back, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. That night, I didn't celebrate with champagne or loud laughter. I made tea. I watched the rain, and I allowed myself to sit in the quiet without fear. For the first time since losing my husband, I felt like myself again, not someone's burden or problem to solve, just me. Later, I went through an old photo album. There were pictures of my wedding, of David as a toddler, of family picnics and birthday cakes. I lingered on one of my husband holding me on our 30th anniversary. I whispered, I did it, love. I stood up. I made it through. I felt his presence then, not in a ghostly sense, but in my own strength. in the courage he always told me I had. Life after that moved slowly but peacefully. David began untangling the knots in his marriage. He filed for separation not out of vengeance, but for his own peace. He started therapy. He came by often, sometimes just to sit in silence. We didn't need words to rebuild, just presence. I baked more. I hosted small gatherings with neighbors. I replanted my garden with perennials flowers that bloom again and again, even after harsh seasons, because that's what I had become, a perennial, bent by storms maybe, but never broken. Not for good. 3 weeks after the hearing, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name, in a handwriting I recognized instantly. Melissa's inside was a single folded sheet. No legal jargon this time, no threats, just a few shaky lines of ink. I lost everything. And maybe I deserved to. I thought I was protecting my life, my home, my family. But I see now, I was only protecting the lie. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I read it once, then again. Then folded it up and placed it in a box labeled Past. That's where it belongs. The court ruled in our favor. Every charge Melissa filed was dismissed. The judge's final remarks stayed with me. This wasn't just a dispute. It was a lesson in truth, in courage, and in how we treat the people who raise us. Today, I live in a warm little home just outside Portland. My garden is small but full of color. I bake on Sundays. I joined a community book club, and we laugh more than we read. David visits weekly. We talk, really talk now. No more walking on eggshells. Just two people trying to rebuild something honest, one Sunday afternoon at a time. Do I miss my husband? Every day. Do I wish things had gone differently? Of course. But I've also learned this. Heartbreak can be a beginning if you let it. Pain can be a doorway not to bitterness, but to strength, to self-respect, to peace. I didn't move in with my son to be anyone's maid. I moved in because I was broken, and I came out whole. So if you've been made to feel like you're too much or in the way, if someone has tried to shrink your worth because of your age or your presence, please remember, you matter. You are not a burden. And you deserve to be seen, heard, and honored. And now, I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments what you thought of my story. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It truly helps more than you know, because our stories deserve to be told, and you never know who might need to hear yours next.